Today we are going to take a look at the 10 biggest companies in the world. Hello and welcome. My name is Peter B. and I welcome you here at My First Million, where we are achieving our financial goals together. So I always like to look at some statistics. So in today's statistic, we are going to take a look at what are the 10 most biggest companies in the world. So, and just one note in advance to take into consideration, there's a few days delay from the time this has been recorded until it's published. So in the meantime, maybe some of the numbers have slightly changed, but more or less it should still be the same. So what are the 10 biggest companies in the world? There are many different ways how to take a look at, but I usually use the market cap as an example. Market cap is short for market capitalization. So it's basically the value of a company. So the market cap, it's basically the value of a company. But usually only companies that are traded on the stock market are taken into consideration, because non-publicly traded companies, it's very hard to figure out what's their true market capitalization, what's the real value of those companies. Another way how you can determine the value of a company, the market cap of a company, is you take the number of shares outstanding and multiply with the current share price. And those calculations together will usually should end up to the market cap. But you need to take into consideration that some companies have more than one kind of stock. So maybe those different kind of shares, sometimes like a preferred shares, also need to be taken into consideration. So now finally go to the numbers. What are the 10 biggest companies at the beginning of 2023? I not only listed the 10 biggest ones for this year, but also from all previous 5 years, back to 20 years ago. So you see the biggest company now still is Apple, followed closely by Saudi Aramco, followed by Microsoft, then Alphabet, which is basically Google, Amazon, Berkshire Hathaway, the company that's led by Warren Buffett, then UnitedHealth, Johnson&Johnson, Exxon, and Visa. So these are the 10 biggest companies by market cap. And you see, you need to have around more than 430 billion US dollar worth of market capitalization in order to be appearing on the top 10 list this year. And Apple, in contrast, is nearly 5 times bigger, at least 4 times bigger than number 10, with $2 billion in market cap. So it's also showing, if you go through the historical list, it's also showing Saudi Aramco is a newcomer on this list, because Saudi Aramco wasn't publicly traded before. 5 years ago, Saudi Aramco hasn't been publicly traded yet. So sometimes you will see suddenly some bigger appearances on the list, because some big companies, which maybe in this case was state-owned, got their IPO and start to be publicly traded. Sometimes other newcomers on the list that were smaller before, but then grew maybe more than other previous companies which were on the list. So if you want to study this list a little bit closer, feel free to pause the video, make a screenshot, and go through the lists year by year. So, but I am focusing now on a few highlights that I want to make considering this list. First highlight is Microsoft. Microsoft in 2003 was leading the list with 264 billion US dollar worth of market capitalization. And you see, Microsoft was the only company that remained on the list throughout the whole 20 years. So every time, of course, the market cap, this time periods are just like a snapshot, but every time the snapshot was taken, Microsoft was on the top 10 list and remained to be on the top 10 list throughout the years. So it went down though from number 1 to number 7, and then now it's climbing up to the spot number 3. An interesting take though from Microsoft is in the dot-com bubble, Microsoft's market cap already exceeded 600 billion. So before 2003, Microsoft's market cap was already at one point over 600 billion. And then it dropped significantly and still stayed at number one with 264 in 2003. And it took, I think, over 15 years for Microsoft to climb back to the 600 billion. So if you would have bought Microsoft at the top of the tech bubble, at the very peak of the tech bubble, it took nearly 15 or even more than 15 years until you would finally get back to initial price of your initial investments. But now, as you see, it's even significantly climbed higher. So 5 years ago, it was more than the 600 billion, and now it's also 1.7, nearly 1.8 billion. So nearly 3 times in maybe 25 years. So another highlight that I want to make, where do the companies come from? And I color coded the list. So, and you see here, the huge majority of the companies are color coded blue. And these are all the companies who are calling the US, the United States, as the home. So always this list has been dominated by companies from the United States. Then the second area, so the red ones highlighted in red, are the Chinese stocks. So you see in 2008, basically there was an uptrend before the financial crisis of Chinese stocks getting more and more closer to the, more and more pushing into the most valuable stocks companies around the world. But since then, they were slowly diminishing again because of like underperformance of the Chinese stock market. But then Tencent and Alibaba came up again. But again, with the recent downturn for the last 1 or 2 years, they again dropped out of the top 10 list. And then the orange ones are the companies that are located in other countries. So now in 2023 on the newest list, Saudi Aramco, based in Saudi Arabia, is the only non-US company that is on the list. And before that, you see like a Nestle is a Swiss company, Gazprom is a Russian company, and then Shell and BP, who were on the list in the early 2000s, are European oil companies. So this leads me directly to the next overview here. The light blue ones, which are especially for the last 2 time periods, are the leading companies, are the companies that you would categorize to the tech space, are the tech companies. And you can see in early stages, there were not only a few tech companies on the list, with Microsoft and maybe also IBM. But over time, there were more and more tech companies appearing on the list. And 2018, the majority of the list was made up of tech companies. But you see in last year's downturn, things shifted a bit. The biggest companies are still tech company, but they finally got a challenger again due to the IPO of Saudi Aramco. And on the lower ranks, 6 to 10, all those 5 companies are not tech anymore. So Berkshire Hathaway, then the yellow highlighted ones are more healthcare related. Then the green highlighted ones are more like a banking. And the purple ones are oil and energy related stocks. Now let's see how well the top 10 companies have performed. So in 2003, the total of the top 10 companies had a market cap of not yet 2 trillion yet. So as you have seen the list before, now Apple alone is already over 2 trillion. And so 20 years later, today, the top 10 companies' market cap combined is over 10 trillion. So over 5 times more. So if you think about this, it sounds a bit crazy, right? But if you consider what's actually the compounded return that you got over this period of time, it looks more reasonable. So on average, you got a return of around 8.5%, which is more or less what you would expect from the stock market. However, taking into consideration though, this is only market cap increase. So the dividends are not considered. However, in the usual rate of return statistics, you will see also the dividends. So actually the top 10 during this 20-year time period had a better performance than what you would usually expect from the total stock market. And one thing that you need to take into consideration as well, so the average wasn't just 8.5. If you would have invested 20 years ago in just the top 10 companies, you have seen only Microsoft remained on the list. So all the other companies, the 9 other biggest companies in 2003, they are not appearing on the list throughout the time. So on average, those top 10 companies 10 years ago, their performance wasn't 8.5%. It was significantly less. But some newcomers, especially in recent years, the big tech companies, they overcompensated of what others were losing. So on average, the top 10 companies had such an amazing performance because some new companies were making the lists. Considering the current list of top 10 companies, is there any company that surprised you to appear on the list? Please share in the comments below. Also, I'm wondering, have you invested in any of the big tech, not just big tech, but in the biggest 10 companies currently? For me personally, yes, I have, but mostly not through individual stock picks, but just through choosing ETFs. The only thing I'm not sure is Saudi Aramco, if one of my ETFs is also covering Saudi Aramco. I need to review those fact sheets of the ETFs that I have invested in first to see if I'm invested there. But besides this, I am covered through my ETFs and have invested and therefore some exposure to all of the big companies. How about you? So thanks a lot for joining me today. I look forward to see you in the next video, and especially I look forward to see you winning financially.